Hi, I'm Mara Webster within Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so excited today to be talking all things Ted Lasso with the fantastic Toheeb Jimoh. And I wanted to start by talking about the initial shaping of your character with Sam, because when you first auditioned for the role, the scripts were still being finessed and coming together, and it sounds like you had a lot of opportunity to have input on a lot of details in who Sam has ended up being. And how did you navigate finding the places where you really wanted to bring those personal elements of yourself into him as a character, and where you really wanted to have that separation between yourself and Sam as well?
So right off the bat, when I got my the email for the audition for Ted Lasso, Sam was written as a Ghanaian character, and so the audition scene was the scene where in episode two of season one, it's Sam's birthday, and they're bringing him like stuff from home because he's been feeling homesick, and so like there was in the audition sides there was like Ghanaian food items that he was like he was responding to. And so the first thing I did was like change that and just like made him Nigerian because um it was just like a harder job for me to like play a Ghanaian character. And I was like, at this point, like there isn't anything specific that means that he has to be Ghanaian. It'd be more authentic if they wanted me to do this job for me to make him Nigerian. And so like that was the first thing that I did, kind of without anyone's permission. But hey, like I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. And it worked, and it worked. So we changed that, and I changed that in the audition, and then and they really just like enjoyed the take, and I think they were just really interested in that version of Sam, I think. And so like there was my input was partly in naming Sam. Like I got to like me and Joe Kelly, one of the writers, were going back and forth with like different names because he was supposed to be Sam Abara at one point, and then he was meant to be Sam Fakos, and then Sam Adewumi, and then it just like went back and forth, and so then we settled on Sam Obisanya, which was nice. But like the thing that I was like most interested in was the fact that they were very interested in what I had to say, and like I had never had that before. So there was a part of me that was like, all of these people asking me questions, but like it was very fluid. They were just like really cool with my input, and so yeah, changing the character was um was cool for me. But then also like that didn't necessarily change. Like just because he was Nigerian, it didn't necessarily change Sam as a person. Like he still had like his humility and his sense of himself was very like open and very kind, and at the time like he was still very like meek and quiet and hadn't really found himself in the UK yet. So all of that was the same regardless of whether he was Ghanaian or Nigerian. So that was something that was cool for me to hold on to because like that's very different from myself. But yeah, those are the two main things.
That sense of self that you're describing about Sam is such an interesting thing to watch in him as a character, because he's still fairly young. He's 21. He's still kind of that age where you're still kind of figuring out who you are in the world a little bit, and yet at the same time
Mm-hmm.
he has such a clear, concise sense of self, and it really feels like so much of that comes from his parents, and particularly the relationship with his dad. And so how
100%.
have you always thought about forging that relationship with his dad and really using that to speak to a lot of who he is in his core self?
I think it's just like it's testament to like the one thing that he comes from Nigeria with is like that idea of like be polite, be kind, be nice. Like that's the only thing you can really control. Is like how hard you work and how nice you are to people. And I think like he holds on to that. Like if anything, regardless of how he's doing on the pitch, like his parents won't necessarily be like they won't really mind about that so long as like he stays true to who he is. Like he's about to go overseas and have this like wonderful opportunity and earn a ton of money and suddenly be in the limelight in a public facing job. And so like the main thing was just to hold on to his core values. So like if he did an interview or if he went back home, like his parents would just be like happy with who he was. So yeah, I think I didn't really have much opportunity in the first season to explore his relationship with his dad, but in the second season we started to have like a few more phone calls and some text messages, and it's like a very similar relationship that he has with Ted, and so like a lot of that was what I kind of clinged on to. Like a lot of the time I'd be doing scenes and it'd be somebody like a director or an assistant director or one of the runners like reading a line back to me, but what I held on to was like my relationship with my dad, which is very similar to Sam's relationship with his dad. He's just like he's that support, and everything Sam does, he does to kind of make his parents happy, both his mom and his dad. And so I held on to that, and I also held on to like some of the stuff that I got from doing scenes with Jason. Like the Ted and Sam relationship is very similar to the Sam and dad relationship, and so yeah, those are the two things that I kind of held on to.
And because as you said, he is doing things because he wants to create pride for his parents, but at the same
Mhm.
time, he doesn't have to. It's not the
No.
relationship that we see that Jamie has with his dad where he's really trying to prove something. And do you feel like that's part of the genesis with Sam of where a lot of his lightness and joy and passion with the game stems from? Because if he did something completely different tomorrow, his parents wouldn't care. He's doing this purely because he has that drive and that passion, and he's not trying to prove himself to anybody else.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that take. It's exactly that. Like, I think it's what happens when like parents allow people to just like be free and do what they want. So it's the complete opposite of Jamie's relationship with his dad, whereby like his dad is forcing this thing on him, and like Jamie's pushing back against it. Like, if anything, it's the opposite with Sam and his dad, in that like he can do anything that he wants. And so as a result, like Sam puts more effort into it and like wants to give more to his dad because like he just allows him to be free and like he's a kind of safe space for him. And so yeah, like it's exactly that.
And the relationship between Sam has obviously been incredibly tempestuous and really shifted and evolved throughout the season. And we're getting the opportunity now to see Sam being incredibly emotionally intellectual in the way that he looks at Jamie and really understands that Jamie is a product of the way that he was raised, and a lot of
Mhm.
his external behavior are defense mechanisms. And, we had the moment when he first came back and Sam was like, a lot of things have changed since you were filming your little TV show. And what was interesting about that moment in particular is that he could have been incredibly vitriolic. There was kind of the thing of, I'm not going to actually help you up from the ground and I'm going to tell you as it is. And how did you navigate how far you felt Sam would take it, where he's not taking it into a level of being completely mean, but he still wants to make his point known?
I think it's like the thing with characters like Ted and like Sam and even like Danny Rojas, usually when you see them on TV is that like when you're the good guy and you're the nice person, like you usually get taken advantage of. And like you like I think what's really interesting about characters like Ted and Sam is that like they do have like that spine and that backbone. And you get to see that more with Sam in season two. And so it's just a thing of standing your ground. And I think that's how you approach things with any bully, is that you don't, that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, or it doesn't take away from Sam's kindness or anything. But there are some opportunities with like some moments where you just have to stand your ground. And I think that's exactly what that was. We played with it a bit when we were shooting it, like how far Sam would take it. Like there was a take where I just like actually stepped over him, and I was like, okay, maybe that's a bit too far. Even the head rub was, a bit much, but like he did it in the first season. So like we played with it a little bit, but I think the version that we settled on and the version that everybody gets to see is one where like he just gets to stand on his own 2 feet, like stand his ground, let him know what's good, and then carry on. Like he doesn't need to dwell on it. No one needs to stew in it. It's just it is what it is, and we move on.
Yeah. And you were talking before about how part of Sam's journey in the first season, especially, was him really finding his feet and finding his space at home in London. And how for you has that influenced the relationship and the rapport and a lot of the dynamic that he has with his teammates, because they're in essence becoming the second version of a family for him, especially first when you first move somewhere and you don't know anybody yet. And that becomes your entire ecosystem and your entire bubble that you have.
Yeah, it's just the thing of like trying to cling on to people, and in the first season, like the team is very like fragmented. Like Roy's the captain, and he doesn't really speak to anyone. He's just kind of being Roy Kent. Like Nate's getting bullied. Nobody really believes in Ted. Like Jamie's got like his little clique, and everybody else is just kind of scattered. And so when you're the new kid coming into that, you kind of don't really know where to position yourself. But as the team starts to gel and as the team starts to bond, and Rebecca gets involved and Higgins gets involved and Ted, like everybody becomes like part of that family. I think like he just finds himself right in the middle of it. And so at the start of season two, with Roy gone and with Jamie gone, like if anything, like Sam's starting to find himself like as like as one of the leaders of the team. Like he's filling that gap, like the Roy Kent hole and the Jamie Tartt hole, and so suddenly, like after being the outsider who's just kind of thrust in and the little kid who nobody really knows, like he's getting the Dubai Air campaign, he's scoring lots of goals now that he's a forward, and so like he finds himself at the heart of that and right at the middle of the team, which is really cool. Like, and it's like it's just great progression to get to show over the space of like 2 seasons.
Yeah. And whilst it's a show about football, it's also not a show about football, but there are moments of
Yeah.
football within the show. And I think you do a great job at really exercising and exploring, how his mentality and how his relationship on the team really informs the way that he plays on the field. And you don't necessarily have stunt doubles that are coming in and doing a lot of those moves for you. That is all of you on the pitch when we're watching the show. And so for you in a lot of those scenes, how have you always wanted to use those to really explore the character beats and use his moves on the field as an exploration of the internal journey that he's going through?
We definitely don't have any stunt doubles. We definitely do all the stunts ourselves, and so like for good or for worse, like it's us out there, which is nice. And I love that because I played football as a kid growing up, and so like I actually just get to be a football player, even though like usually when we shoot, it's cold, miserable. It always rains when we need to do football stunts, which is yeah. So like it's not the funnest to film, but it's nice to see when we've actually done it. But Sam's relationship on like how do I get to inform Sam off the pitch through like the on the pitch stuff. I think like it's interesting because like when I was thinking of Sam and when I was like looking at footballers that I wanted to kind of base him on, like I was thinking a lot about like N'Golo Kante, who's a Chelsea midfielder, and like he has like a kind of humility about him, and you know, like he usually doesn't do like many interviews, and like he drives a very modest car, and like he's got that kind of sensibility about him. But there's also like Marcus Rashford, who's like a young, dynamic footballer who's very vocal on and off the pitch politically as well. And so like it's a kind of a blend of both. And so like in the second season, there's a lot of times where you know, like he as much as he is very like as much as his character is very like you can call him meek and you can call him like humble and kind and all of that stuff, like he's also a 21-year-old footballer with a bucket ton of passion. And so I think on the pitch is where that gets to come out a lot more. And so like you know, like if like burning passion is the main thing that I focus on, like on the pitch, like if he's doing anything, he's doing it 110%. And so like he's almost kind of a different person on the pitch than off the pitch. Like he'll scream at a referee if he has to, and I love to get to like explore that. Like like you said, we don't really get to see that much, but I love exploring that side of him, like on the pitch. And so like that bit where in episode 6 where we win the game and we're going to the semi-final and going to Wembley, like you see him like screaming, like yelling on top of the thing in the dressing room. And like we don't get to see that version of Sam very much, but I love playing that version of Sam because it's there as well. Like he is still a passionate 21-year-old footballer. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up Wembley Stadium and seeing the team play there, because I'm probably giving away a trade secret that the advanced screeners didn't have all of the visual effects superimposed yet, so there were certain green screen moments, and
Yeah.
we actually get to see the fact that you're using the same pitch that you're usually on for all of their home games as a
Yep.
substitute for Wembley, and
Yeah.
yet at the same time you really have to capture that sense of grandeur. You know, what's it like to be in that stadium with the audience, the fact it's this huge pivotal professional moment for all of those players. And so even though you were filming on the same pitch that you're playing on for all of the other scenes in the show, how did you all approach the Wembley scenes differently in wanting to really capture that essence and that scope of what that moment is for them as a team?
I remember the first thing when we walked out in actual Wembley. So we were allowed to do the actual walkout, but we weren't allowed to step a foot on the pitch. Like we were told if anybody steps one foot on that pitch, everybody goes home. We're all shut down. And so nobody dared to do it apart from Brett Goldstein right at the end. Like he stepped a foot on it and then everyone just ran away. So we were told like we couldn't step on the pitch. And so we got to do the walkout. And I remember the first time all of us walked out because we had this day in our diary, like me, Billy Hughes, like Collar, like all of us young ones, like we dreamed of Wembley our whole life. And so like when we walked out, like I just remember all of us being like awestruck, like it was breathtaking. And like we were all looking up, the place was huge. And so immediately after we did that, we all just kind of knew that like that's what we've got to take back home to West London Film Studios when we're filming like our much smaller pitch. That first feeling of like, oh, like, do you know what I mean? Like everybody's looking up, your sternum's open, like it's breathtaking stuff. Like you've got to have that on the pitch. And so that was the main thing that like I held on to, like the first feeling of being at Wembley. Um, it, I think at that point, when we were actually filming the game stuff, like the stakes of the match were, you know, like were added to the fact that we were at Wembley. And so like at that point, it was just we've got to get the next goal. And so like that, you know, like transferred itself into that. Like it was just about like doing what we had to do on the pitch. And but while we were doing that, it was also like as soon as that camera is this close to your face, you have to remember that you're still like in the biggest stadium in the country. And so yeah, those things are like, you know, the technical side of things, but we managed to do it.
I also wanted to talk about the dialogue because I think the dialogue is so brilliantly executed and there's just such a level of detail and attentiveness in every single line. And whether it's a single moment and a single word where like Higgins is asking him, what does Christmas mean to you back home? And he just comes back with colonization, or whether
Yeah.
it's after a loss where he's giving an on-camera interview and there's a huge amount of subtext as he sees Rebecca walk by in the background. You know, it also feels like the level of detail also gives you a lot of undercurrent to play with the dialogue. So when you work with the scripts, what are the ways in which you're always looking for and thinking about the subtext and the way that you can use single lines, single words to deliver an entire other element of dialogue into a scene as well?
Yeah, there are times like that where, like you'll get a script back and Jason or Joe or whoever has like written a monologue and like it's almost like you're doing a play again because like there's so much like subtext in the lines and you can actually just like geek out and do that kind of work like as though it's theater, which is great. And so like that level of detail, like I love it because it makes my job so much easier. Like the way the lines are written for Sam are so different to the way that the lines are written for anybody else in the script. Like so often like Sam would say like I did not expect that as opposed to I didn't. Like, you know what I mean? Like things like that are so crucial to like just helping me feel like I am this person. And it's also like what makes Sam different from any other like Nigerian character that I'll play is that like he has like his own very specific way of speaking, his own very specific way of doing things that's, in the text. And that's the type of actor that I am anyway. Like I very much love getting a script and then like looking for the clues within that script and seeing how I can bring that to life as opposed to like I don't usually like to like just like change stuff to make it suit me. Like I'd much rather like do that work. That's like the fun bit for me. So yeah, like I think we're super lucky that we've got the writers that we do because you're right, the detail is in that. And so, like even the Sam and Rebecca stuff you'll see like has been coming from the first season, like that first time where he walks into our office and they have that conversation. Like there's even like little bits of, like, oh, I'm not here, I'm not asking you out on a date, but like you are like you must get asked out all the time because like you're glorious or whatever. And so like little bits like that like are like just breadcrumbs for the season 2 stuff. I think it's great. And so yeah, we're just super lucky to have the writers that we have.
Yeah, and the teasers went beyond the dialogue. It was even a lot of actions where Jason would be like, "Why don't you offer to take? Sam's going to take Rebecca's bag from her before she sings
Yeah,
karaoke."
yeah. I remember
And
I remember that moment especially because like she was like, oh, like I've got to drop my bag, and Jason's just there rubbing his mustache, and he goes, Sam should take it. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Like, we'll take it. But like, you just know, like, Jason's ticking away. Like, he's going like, cool, season 2, season 3. Like, you know what I mean? It's good. Yeah. Jason's a guru, man.
what was the point in which they let you in on the secret and the fact that they had been building that anticipation for so long already?
Me and Jason and Joe and like a lot of the main actors in the team, like we play FIFA a lot. So when we finished filming season 1, we're about to film season 2. Like we'd just be playing games through the summer, which like wasn't a way to stay connected with the Americans while they went back home and we were in London and stuff. So like we'd just be like talking and stuff, and every now and then like little bits would come out, and Jason would be like, "Oh, like there's a cool." So like I knew a little bit about the Dubai Air stuff because like some of that had come out, and he was like, "We're gonna explore like Sam's political side," and then there was like, "Oh, there might be even be like a bit of romance stuff." So I knew that was coming. I didn't know it was gonna be with Rebecca. And so like that was a secret on set that people decided to keep from me for a little while. And then like as it got closer and closer and closer, like people would be like, "Oh, do you know who it is?" And I'd be like, "No." And then like it slowly revealed itself like as we got to like episode 5 and episode 6, and I was like, I see. you know. But it was cool. Like once I found out, like I was over the moon. It just means that, I get to do more scenes with Hannah, who is awesome. And yeah, it's great. Like, and I also really believe in the Sam and Rebecca dynamic. Like at the end of the day, like she's somebody who's been through so much horrible stuff with men who have like treated her horribly and made her feel like terrible. And so like what she gets with Sam, even though there's a huge age gap between them, is just somebody who makes her feel good, somebody who's nice to her. And ultimately I think that's the most important thing. And so like I'm glad that they like ultimately decide to give it a try and like see what's there. And so yeah, like I'm rooting for it.
And I think the fact that audiences were surprised for a moment when they found out it was Sam, but then immediately went, "Oh, of course that makes sense," is a testament to the way that the two of you not only played it in terms of the reveal and kind of what's happening in subsequent episodes following, but also
Mhm.
in the way that you built up to it and the way that you've shaped these characters into those spaces, as you were saying. And so once you and Hannah knew that that match was coming, how did the two of you really want to start playing to that dynamic and that chemistry a little bit more so that when it was revealed, it was, of course, it makes sense moment in the show?
Yeah, it's funny because like we usually in season 2 up until that point, like we haven't had that much time with each other apart from the scene where Sam walks into the office. and he tells her that the Dubai Air stuff isn't like, he doesn't want to partake in the Dubai Air campaign, and he's asking for her permission to step out. Well, not really a permission, but he's just letting her know and hoping that she backs it. But then like there's just little moments there where like, like Hannah gives me a look right at the end, and like looks like that are just kind of like, aha, this is like a different side to Sam that I haven't seen before. And so like for me, it was like the change was making sure like Sam didn't seem like a little kid around her anymore. Like he seemed like an older, more like mature version of himself, which he is in the second season. And so like I think that kind of combats the idea of like him being, like the really like timid version of himself that he was around her in the first season, which was like really cool and like nice to play. But now like he's a person who can stand on his own 2 feet, and like he is, like he's maturing, and he's maturing into a young man. And I think that was the main thing for me. And so like as the season goes on, like you'll see that in the way that like he dresses when he goes to see her. Like he's like, I didn't want him to feel like a little kid anymore. Like I wanted him to feel like he was like, what I mean? He's grown Simba. Like, when grown Simba's got like that little mane before he turns into full Simba. Like he's that version of himself.
And then eventually he'll have a huge mane.
Yeah. That's season 3. I want to grow dreadlocks for season 3.
I love the fact that you're describing it in that way, and that maturity, and the fact that he has reached that point where he feels like an equal in conversations with her, and
Yeah.
can completely spar and match with her side by side. Because as we're starting to see the dynamic between them continue to evolve, when he shows up at her house, there's a lot of confidence in that moment,
Yeah.
after they've both met in the restaurant and realized that it's one another, and he's walked her home, and they've kissed. But then later when he shows up at her house after texting her, he has that presumption of, I know that you're going to open the door, and I know that you're going to come to me, and I'm going to be right here for you.
Yeah.
And so was it important to you that he had that level of self-confidence going into it? Because obviously there is also the tricky dynamic of, she is his boss at the club and he is a younger player than her, that the show is obviously going to potentially have to address as well.
Yeah, at some point. I mean, you can just forget about that for now. But yeah, no, 100%. That's exactly it. Like, I think, someone like Rebecca like would only respond to somebody like who is, and it goes back to that thing we were talking about with Jamie, and when he slide tackles him, like he can be assertive, and he has to be assertive, and I think it's that thing where like it's stuff like that that makes these characters not two-dimensional. Is that like they can be like all of these different facets of themselves. And when it comes down to it, and when he does need to be assertive, when he does need to be confident, and when he does need to lead, he can do that. And like that's the thing that's like the juiciest bit for me in season 2, is that like we've seen this version of Sam in season 1, and in season 2, like he's just blossoming. And that, yeah, like at that moment, when he turns up in episode 8 and he's at the door, and she's like, "Oh, why did you send me my address? Why did you send me your address?" And he goes, "For next time." I'm like, that's it. Like, do you know what I mean? He's like, this is, I'm looking at him and I'm like, oh, that's my boy. That's Sam, man. Like, it's great. It's like a wonderful, wonderful journey to go on. And I'm just so glad that like we got to do it this way around in season 2. Like, it's just, yeah, it's brilliant. It's a really, really, really juicy arc to play.
I also like that in terms of who he is as a player, that the show captures a lot of tiny details which build up the immense dedication of self that is required to be an athlete of that level. And even down to the fact that when we see Sam and Rebecca out at the restaurant, she's drinking wine and he's still drinking water because he's in training. They have a game coming up. He can't let it slip even for a moment. Even in a situation like that, he's not going to allow himself to give up anything that might jeopardize the game for him. And is that a real conscious effort on everybody's part to really capture all those details that talk about athleticism in terms of the day-to-day of what that looks like, and also, the way that the show's also been approaching the mentality that's required as well?
Oh, that's a very interesting take, because like the main reason Sam doesn't drink in that scene is because he's a Muslim. And so like he doesn't drink for that reason. Like there was another bit in season 1 where we were at the pub, and we were doing we were trying to like combat the ghosts, and we were having that bit. And I think yeah, like we were in the pub, and like I remember like one of the prop guys gave me a bottle, and it was like, so like the main reason Sam doesn't drink in that scene is because he just doesn't drink full stop. But you're also right, like it goes to like it is also like the secondary reason would be because like he's got a game the next day. And so I mean, he probably shouldn't even be out late, but it is what it is, these boys got to live. But yeah, no, the main reason he doesn't drink in that scene is because he's Muslim, which is something that I think will touch more on going forward. But yeah, like that's just been a thing that like I've known since the jump. Like I say it's been a thing for me because I'm from a Muslim family, and so I'm sure it's like whenever there's an opportunity to explore that, which we rarely get to see on TV. I'm like, I'd love to do it. So yeah, that's the main reason he doesn't drink. But it's also like to do with the fact that he's a professional footballer and he probably shouldn't drink anyway. It's funny because in the first season, when Ted goes into his locker and he's like, oh, this like Sam isn't doing very well. Like inside my actual locker, when you press the 22 and you open it, there were like Snickers and Mars bars and just like sweets and stuff. And so like it's interesting, like you make that point because like he's kind of come full circle from there as well. Like at the beginning where he was just kind of like lost, didn't really know what to do with himself. He wasn't playing very well, like he was just eating rubbish. And so yeah, now it's completely the opposite. I know you don't get to see it, but like when you open the locker, it's not Mars bars and stuff like that in his locker.
And obviously, we keep touching upon the Dubai Air episode, which was a hugely pivotal episode for Sam in particular. And within that, I think it's really interesting in the way that you've constantly talked about that episode, that you've said that he makes the same decision that you would have made in his shoes as well. And so for you as an actor, what does that mean to get to portray a character whose core principle beliefs are so aligned with how you see the world as well, in terms of how you then are able to carry that and think about a lot of his day-to-day decisions as well as the larger scope?
It's a dream. Like it's a dream. It's awesome. It's just like yeah, it's great, and it's not a luxury that I'll always have. And so while I have it, like I'm just I just feel massively privileged. It's just great, especially like I'm playing a Nigerian who gets to stand up for Nigerians in the show. And so like when people hit me up on Instagram or on Twitter and they're from Nigeria, they're in Nigeria now, and like they just like they feel represented and they feel seen. Like that's for me, like after episode 3 came out, like that was the stuff that hit me the most. Is that a lot of times, people who are like a part of the diaspora, like who aren't back home, but whose roots come from like African countries or Caribbean countries or wherever, you just like kind of feel a bit detached sometimes. And like, especially last year and even still now, like there's so much stuff going on with the Nigerian government and people in Nigeria are a bit like stuff is a bit fictitious at the moment. And so for an episode like that to have come out, for me to have been a part of it, like it just feels great because I feel like I'm a part of that conversation and somebody who is in Nigeria can watch that show and feel like a little, 20-something-year-old kid in Brixton in London is like looking out for them. And, like that connects us. And so like, it's great. I honestly can't explain how incredible that feeling is for me. It's one of the best things about this job. It's one of the best things about playing a character like Sam.
Yeah. I love everything that you've brought into him as a character and the real heart and connectivity that you've created in him. And I can't wait to see all of the different places that he continues to go this season. Thank you so much, Toheeb.
Oh, thank you so much, Mara, for having me, man. It's been a like awesome conversation. I loved it.